Hallelujah, my Hal from Beyonds, because it is one of the happiest days of our collective League of Levia lives. Say that 3 times fast. Viscerai Runeblood has ascended to living legend. Oh, Lordy Jesus, I've been waiting for this for so long. He has forever just existed as a pain in my backside. This hero with zero agency in the Levia's corner, just getting absolutely rolled when he drops Malefics and Mordreds and Revels and Swarming Gloomveils, all these zero-cost go-agains that just absolutely roll you over. Those days are gone. They're so gone. It's so exciting. And it actually might shift, and this is something we talked about in the last video, enough of the metagame into maybe some more Jarl, some more Victor, slower mid-rangey decks that can try to counter the other aggro decks that are popular right now. They were held back by Viscerai. If they can come up, then by God, Levia is playable. She's playable, folks. Is she good? I think she's good. Is she playable? Absolutely. Now that will be an objective fact. And because of that, I've been putting more time into Levia. You know, not just the meme stuff. I really think there's something special. There is something special to the post-Vis Bliss that we looked at last week. And so I've continued to develop and iterate on this list, and I'm really enjoying how it plays right now. The main difference from when we looked at it last week is that, you know what? We talked about Blue Trade-In enough. It is back in the list. It actually did perform really well back in the day. Granted, back in the day, you had Art of War to try to banish it away when it didn't do anything to your turn. But if we're leaning completely in to these blue zero costs that fill your grave for 2, this was the missing card. We thought we could kind of replace it with Sigil, but they are different enough in that Sigil you have to then capitalize on the next turn. Trade-In you can sit and wait, but it's not the most ideal arsenal. So there's give and take between both. Neither is perfect, but when you have both in the list, I think they do something quite special. So we've added in blue Trade-In. We've removed blue Tear Limb from Limb because that was the last bit of variance left in the deck. And if you looked at some of the games attached to last week's vid, man, it just didn't always work out. Even with like 45/6s, it still just doesn't work out sometimes. Guess what? No draw discard in the list at all. And it does shift some other things that are quite interesting. You don't need to run Eye of Ophidia anymore. And kind of sticking on theme with, you know what? Let's remove all these additional non-blocks out of the deck, the Eye of Ophidia, the Tear Limb for Limb. What if we shift the entire blue base over to actually blocking? Like literally it blocks. We've got the Dread Screamer blues back in. They're fantastic. They block 3. The Trade-Ins at least block 2. The Sigil and Call block 2. It's really just the Deadwoods and the Doomsdays that don't block. And there is that cheeky last spot, right? And we're adding in a back alley break line instead of the Eye of Ophidia or the Reckless Swing, this kind of flex last blue. I think the back alley break line actually smooths over a lot for this deck because without the draw discards, without the Tear Limb from Limb, yes, you can get good claw rate out of like the Trade-In, the Sigil of Cycles, but sometimes just that extra action point to smooth over what can now be like a Hungering Slaughter Beast red Graveling turn, really strong. So Call to the Grave, it can send a back alley break line to graveyard, you immediately get that action point, and it's super solid. So really enjoyed this blue base upgrade. The other slight shift is I added red Gravelings instead of the Swing Big, mostly to limit test how much graveyard fill is really coming from the Trade-Ins. Do we even need this attack? That, yeah, it's a good rate, 2-card 8, but it's very hard to pair that with other things in a Levia turn. It's very strong early game, and then maybe on a flip turn, otherwise you kind of just end up not getting the ceiling of that card. So if we're adding in the Trade-Ins and the Sigil of Cycles and the Call to the Graves, of course, that's our graveyard fill. Is it enough with the added discard effects of Mark of the Beast and Beast Within to supplement actually running the Gravelings? And I was fine with the Diabolic Offerings kind of being there. They didn't block though, so we shifted the blues around. We're still getting that extra 1 cost in the list with the red Gravelings now, and leaning into that breakpoint effect that was so strong when I added the Hungerings in as well. I think it's actually been working really great. I'm very, very impressed with it. So that's the core. Nothing's really changed in how I'm approaching the sideboard, but in those last 2 slots, I've started to experiment with maybe Dual Threat, maybe Prismatic Leyline. These cards, when they're yellow, you actually can make like a pretty clear-cut decision. Do I just pitch into Howl from Beyond and just get 3 value out of it? Or is there a higher ceiling to this card? And I mean, these both block 3, so you can at least make that choice, same as before. But now maybe a dual threat turn lines up because you've got trade-in, then Claw, then Dread Screamer, then you dual threat, then your Claw is +3, then like a Deeper to Evil is +3 or whatever. It is possible. It's just maybe a little clunky. Prismatic Leyline is in a similar vein where it is possible to check all 3 boxes. Most likely, you're only going to get that blue +3 and like a red +1. When you're looking for like a trade-in turn, obviously that gets +3, and then the red after the 2 claws is going to get the +1. Like that's doable as well, but I think they're maybe just a bit too clunky to fully commit on. So the deck remains a little bit unfinished right here, but there's some games with this deck that I'm pretty happy with now that I've honed it in. Definitely shaken off a bit of the rust as well with Levia because I was having so much fun with Bone Basher. This list is, once again, stressful, it's tough, it's Blood Debt Levia, but it does win. So here we go. First game on the docket is going to be versus an Enigma, and this one I actually think is going to have a bit of an uptick, right? With Viserai no longer the metagame, the decks that were gate kept by him now rise. Enigma, definitely one of them, definitely a big contender, and it is Flesh and Blood after all. People are always wanting to play their Illusionist anyway. When there's even the smallest excuse to want to play it because it's meta relevant, then they're going to do it. So I do expect we're going to see Enigmas again, and this has also been a bit of a discussion on X, on Twitter. There was this back and forth on whether Enigma is actually a good matchup for Levia, and you know, there are no inherent advantages out of this being an Illusionist for us to take advantage of. We don't really get to pop anything. They tend to side out Phantasmaclasm. It's really just Miraging Metamorph. If we pop Miraging Metamorph, they get an upside from it anyway. So there's no inherent advantage there. Also, we don't, you know, really get to use Scab Skins to clear auras. That's not exactly how it works either. It's basically just a damage check every turn. And with the draw discards in the past, the flippy doos of the Cheetah package, whatever you want to call them, Pulpings and Wild Rides, there was a lot of variance in this matchup that wasn't very comfortable to play into. Like you had to, because that's the way the deck was built. But once again, because those were non-blocks, you just had to, no other choice. And playing into some of that variance was really, really tough. Potentially even tilting as well, depending on the outcome, right? So we're just removing all that, and let's just see how the matchup tends to go. On the turn 0 there, Enigma developed Rage Spectre, and then instead of just passing, trying to take advantage on their side, right, of us basically being forced to pop a Miraging Metamorph, they made the call that us getting Graveyard Fill was not as relevant as them getting that second Rage Spectre. I don't think they're exactly right in that call, because if you look at how our graveyard was able to be filled, that was fantastic. We get to block with a Howl as well, just filter out this hand of kind of blah cards, right? We draw up into a hand, also not that exciting, but something that at least plays going second quite well. Continue on with Graveyard Fill. We don't have to start banishing yet. We get that agility for next turn. There is a slight downside in what the Deadwood Rumbler kind of did for our long-term game plan. It drew discarded this Doomsday, but if you think about just overall draw sequence, this was going to be a game where we likely just don't see Doomsday anyway. We would have drawn it up next turn, definitely not playable, probably pitching it away. The only times it comes back is if we like call to the grave or have this really, and then shuffle right, or have this really long game where we flip and then like draw into it later. I would have guessed we probably just don't play with Doomsday this game because we would see it in the next hand anyway. So sure, it's a draw discard, not the ceiling that we wanted there. Would have loved to hit a 6. We could start recycling that Howl from Beyond, but whatever. I don't think it's that big of a deal. So Enigma then has this fantastic rate, developing a Rage Spectre, swinging back with it. Really solid play on the return here. On our end though, we have that agility token, and we can really push to make use of a little bit of tight sequencing here, right? Where maybe your first instinct is, oh, we've got the Howl, let's try to banish it real quick. But actually Deeper Evil is another one of your recursion pieces, right? So the agility is just fantastic. We're gonna swing with it first. We're going to close the chain, and then we're gonna play the Hungering Slaughter Beast. So no immediate effect whether we hit the recursion pieces or not, but on the next turn cycle, it's this additional intellect that we basically will get to play around with. We don't hit it, so no choices necessarily made yet, but the graveyard is starting to go back under our control. We had, a full turn cycle back and forth of not managing it exactly how we want. as soon as we start hitting these triple banishers, it's going to start looking good for us. So totally fine spot in the game. When you look at an Enigma with a 5-card hand, this can be generally not like a disruptive play out of the Enigma, unless they have naturally drawn it into some sequence that can like turn something into a chi, drop that Miragai, and then like a CNC. They look for those plays a lot, but they haven't made a chi yet. They didn't block with Traverse. That'd be like a really lucky draw sequence, I guess. Instead, when they have a 5-card hand like this, it's probably a lot of board development. And sure enough, that's exactly how this ends up playing out. From our side, it's just value at this point. We block if we want to, but we don't really want to. We're just going to skip forward a little bit. They were having an issue with Restless Coalescence was bugged. So we'll just skip forward. I did just manually take the 3 damage. It wasn't letting them attack with it. We do play a bit greedy with this hand though, because if we banish our recursion pieces, then this hand looks a lot better. But we don't know if we're going to banish those recursion pieces yet. So I lean into it thinking, okay, if we at least get like the Deep-Rooted Evil going, then we'll just swing that. We'll arsenal the Beast Within. Beast Within actually makes us a bit immune to their incoming CNCs, right? If we hit the Howl, then sure, we'll let that sit and just attack with the Beast Within, or rather attack with the Deadwood Rumbler in this instance, and just try to then target banish the missing recursion piece. If we hit both of them though, then we actually get to just dump the whole hand for damage right into their board, which developed quite a bit of ward. So I think the trade-off there, playing into a bit of, like a risky outcome. We don't know what the banish is going to be, but the ceiling of it looks so good. It answers their board so well, and we still had outcomes that were generally favorable for us spending those 4 cards somehow, no matter what the banish hit. So we launch back with this turn cycle. They are not taking too much damage yet with the way their board developed. The damage trades actually not favoring us just yet, but we haven't played much into our recursion yet. We just had that 1 round of doing so. There's still a lot more left to play in this game, and the more we do, the more it's going to feel oppressive. We just have this extra intellect. It's kind of like a half intellect, because the cards aren't that insane, but the more you play them, the more oppressive it feels, because now Levia just has full decision making. A lot of proactive graveyard fill, that's the huge part that comes from Howl, and a lot of access to on-rate go-again turns. That's kind of what Deep-Rooted Evil does. And by adding back Blue Dread Screamer, we really want to play into that stuff. I mean, it's fantastic. You get your triple blue, or I guess it's quad blue, Blue Dread Screamer, plus another 3 blues. Hey, even in second cycle, you're now going to come in for, you can go ahead and dump the Howl onto the Dread, into the Howl again, onto the Deep-Rooted Evil. And it's like absolutely insane that you're doing that all from blue base. So at this point, that's kind of all we need. We've got the 1 Howl, we've got the 1 Deep-Rooted. So pitching the second Howl in, we're probably not going to be searching it out anytime soon. Don't really need to. We've already got pieces in play. We've got our graveyard in a good spot. But one thing you do want to start considering with your graveyard is what equipment pieces can help me get exactly where I need to be. And since we're not running Flesh Bag, if we go ahead and prime our Apex Bonebreaker to just block 1 more time to get to graveyard, that's actually a pretty important spot as you transition into the late game. You want to make sure you get good value out of the Apex first, so that when you maybe aren't giving your opponent much room to return, then you can just block Apex, kind of get it out of the way, rather than thinking you can block twice with it late game. Sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So we go ahead and give the value now. We make a choice to go ahead, play off of Arsenal here, just to get the Apex Bonebreaker. I think it's slightly more towards what we want to play for, is just making sure graveyard state feels good. So this hand then lets us return a 3-card 13. It's completely unaffected by the erase face regardless, but they've now transcended. That's the other thing we need to start keeping track of. So Traverse is a pretty solid equipment piece at this point, right? So we throw back the Endless Moths, come in for 13. It hit that Howl again, just absolutely beautiful. So we're still playing off of Arsenal at this point in the game. We could have kept the Boneyard in Arsenal, but it's actually a little bit of a low ceiling Arsenal. In this matchup, I don't really want to put a Boneyard there. It looks like a good rate play. You know, you can drop the Howl from Beyond on it, 2-card 9, sure. Like a small hand Bloodrush, sure. But we want to look for higher ceiling arsenals. And actually in this matchup, the blue trade-in feels really good in this regard as well, because attacking for this awkward just 1 damage, depending on the Enigma's board state, can look pretty devastating. Like, do they give this a whole card? Do they discard a shelter? If they discard a shelter, then they're just blocking 3, not 4. That's awesome. If they have a spectral shield, like, they just let the spectral shield eat it. Like, you get good outcomes generally, even with the blue trade-in, and it lets you turn that full hand into claw plays, right? And to this point, we've got the Howl of the Deep-Rooted Evil, so you start discarding those Beast Withins, those Mark of the Beast, it turns hands really live. So that's more towards what we're leaning with, our arsenal for this game. And sure enough, as we draw up, that's the choices we get to start making. By not having the Boneyard and Arsenal, we actually can just look to play this one out instead, which is kind of funny. If we had the Boneyard and Arsenal, then we would want to block with this one, which maybe actually makes them a copy of like a Waxing or Rage Spectre, right? Or not Rage Spectre, Waxing or Waning, right? Those are the ones that they could drop in response. So maybe like a slight punish if we actually had to block with Boneyard, but we're not going to. We're just going to go ahead and give this extra blue out of our hand. Sure enough, that would have been duplicated if we did pop it. So now we just go for the 2-card rate. Let's get that Boneyard flowing. This is one of the strongest things Recursion can do for you. Pushes you above rate by a full card so that you get to Arsenal. Now your turn has been 2 cards for 9 damage. That should be like a 3-card play generally. What you're going to do with that advantage is buy yourself a higher ceiling later. You can kind of do it up front, block with an extra card, get this rate back immediately on like a turn cycle thing. But that's what makes Flesh and Blood so interesting, is you can play for those differences, and Levia specifically does it so well, of is it a turn cycle difference I need right now, or is it a future decision that I want made because of my arsenal? And with Levia, I think arsenal is just so darn important. So now they're blocking with Traverse. They're going to go ahead, tutor out the Chi. This generally means a Miragai play is coming, but we have that trade-in, so I feel pretty good about it. When they block with this extra card, though, if they go for a Miragai, it means it shouldn't be followed up with Disruption, and so that's actually quite beneficial for us, because the ceiling of what they can do is drop Miragai and then, swing with it into CNC or something, really punish us. We have Carrion Husk to deny that anyway, so we're insulated regardless, but it's also just nice to know that that's not the play they're going for. Awesome, we just don't have to worry about it just yet. But we want to start considering, okay, at this point, we're not entirely sure how our Demi-Hero is going to interact with the game. It looks like we are ahead enough that maybe we just kind of ignore it, don't take an off turn to flip, but you want to keep those options open. It might get to this point where they've got this insane turn, your hand gets stripped, your hand's non-functional, whatever, and you just need the out of flipping the Demi-Hero anyway. So we're just using armor, we're protecting our decision-making process on that. But now we've got another choice. This is not a strong Bloodrush Fellow hand to just rip, because our arsenal is a trade-in. No reason to want to trade in an arsenal if you're launching a Bloodrush on a 4-card hand. We'd rather reverse that. So by leading with the trade-in, we can guarantee a bit of a filling the graveyard, right? Like Shadow Realm Horror now has an extra 6 it can hit. If anything, it also lets us kind of pivot our decisions. We knew we'd have 1 yellow that we'd pitch in freely, and maybe if the arsenal ends up being something, it's hard to say stronger than a Bloodrush, but even if we draw blue there, a yellow there, then we get this extra claw swing in. If we don't, then we can consider, okay, pitch the Bloodrush for the claw and arsenal the red that we drew. So trade-in just adds a lot of decisions to what that turn can be. But nothing we can really do with that go again on the Shadow Realm Horror. So the turn worked out. We got the Bloodrush where we wanted, the graveyard's fine. And now we have a perfect Bloodrush hand. I mean, this is fantastic. We've got a lot of life. In theory, we're not really susceptible to needing to give them answers until they do throw Disruption, which they obviously did. So a bit tough here because we wanted to keep this full hand, but our hand does scale well with throwing just the Howl and Boneyard and then waiting a bit. What I absolutely did not expect was for Enigma to run Red Pummel. So this was kind of insane. I thought for sure they're throwing Pummel and then dropping a Waning Spectre. Right, they've got an extra resource floating. Makes total sense from what I'm used to with Enigma. I guess I was not used to that, because holy crap, Red Pummel got us. They didn't do it with a great rate. They didn't do it with Tunic or something, but it took away our Bloodrush and the Boneyard. But we have Spoiled Skull. And at this point, Spoiled Skull, a lot of targets. We could hit 2 breakpoint attacks, either the Hungering Slaughter Beast or the Shadowrealm Horror, so good chances for it to be a 1-card 7. Insane. If anything, though, it was going to turn off Blood Debt just by the virtue of having other options like the Boneyard. So that's fantastic. Like, holy crap, Spoiled Skull really, really bailed us there. It's actually so hard to understate how important that was. Like, you lose the game outright otherwise. It's just crazy. I mean, to be fair, though, if we had Fleshbag, it would have been, we would have just been able to keep the whole thing because we could just block with Hungering, the Scabs, and the Fleshbag, and then we just like don't get hit by the Pummel CNC. But either way, like in this game, I'm not expecting that Fleshbag is doing much. So I'd rather make sure that we can keep aggression going with Spoiled Skull, find more access to go again. In this instance, it actually flexed really well. Let us not die to Blood Debt. Now Shadowrealm Horror is coming in, and this is one of the most beautiful parts of playing Shadowrealm Horror. You have so much flexibility in these play lines. It's either Shadowrealm Horror just to follow up with the Graveling. You know, you hit 2, okay, drop the Graveling. If you don't, now that Graveling, hey, that's a yellow. That's a 1-cost yellow 6. Incredibly flexible card. It even blocks 3. Come on. You can pitch it now into Howl, into the Boneyard. This hand, all of a sudden, this was a 3-card hand. They do, minus it with the drop in the ocean there, but 3-card 15, close to 3-card 16. That's nuts. It's so good. It's so good for us. So just the beauty of horror. I love this card. And when it hits 3, generally it does more for your game than Bloodrush, just because you just can convert that so well. Like, it's hitting your 6s. Your 6s are good. They're above rate. You should be throwing back something ridiculous. Whereas Bloodrush, like, you rip it, you might not draw well, and there's just more variability to Bloodrush. But if your horror is good and your graveyard looks good, you just like know there's power there. Whereas you don't know there's power behind the Bloodrush draws. So fantastic return out of us here. And we continue on now happily in the lead. We've got just such strength behind us still, with the ability now to convert 4-card hands just a little bit better than normal. I would say mostly thanks to the flexibility of Back Alley Break line with this Call to the Grave. We don't go for that line here because we didn't have to block down with the card, but when you drop a 4-card hand like that, late game, the Call to the Grave, just like Searching a Beast Within is fine, like you're just replacing, you're drawing a card. But actually, especially with recursion setup, you can just like get an action point and then do something dumb. Like if we had an extra blue instead of an extra yellow, we could just Back Alley Break line with the Call to the Grave, throw Endless Maw into Deep Rooted Evil. 4-card 15. 4-card 15, like that's so good. Okay, anyway, that's a game into Enigma. The next one we've got here is into an Oscilio. This matchup's like really awkward. Really awkward. What it does to your equipment suite is so strange. I've gone ahead in the sideboard. It should be completely up to date with the new link on the sideboard stuff. If I forgot matchups, I definitely did. Just like let me know what you need help with in the League of Levia. But into Oscilio, what I've been trying is no AB. I think part of it is Fleshbag is just so stupidly strong that I have to warp my equipment choices around wanting Fleshbag. And so the best thing that I've figured out is, okay, look, at the end of the day, we're not really going to pitch into AB. It's kind of like that Viscerai problem, where when we give them a card, we want it to go to graveyard, so there's some slight upside for us. But we don't want their Arcane on hit effects to go through. So we're running the Cloak equipment anyway for Kano, and it actually works quite well into Oscilio because you don't lose much by not running Husk. Husk isn't really blocking for more than 4 in this matchup. Very rarely are they attacking for 7. They can with Electrostatic, or maybe like a Lightning Press, but it's super rare, super fringe, and you might be, well past 13 by the time like you see that happen, right? So running the Cloak pieces as chest and arms instead let you decide, oh, this Mind Warp that's coming in for like 6, it's not going to do anything for me. I'm going to take 2 damage. I'm going to keep this hand and just keep things rolling. So I quite like it. You still get tons of block out of Scab Skins and Fleshbag, but you don't get any hand filtering from AB like on a turn 0 situation. So this instance, right, I was going second, they choose to go first. That's where not having AB hurts the most. So I think there might be like a slight equipment difference if you're going first versus second for this matchup. I just have not tested it enough. So we go into our turn here, And I rolled Scabs because, you know, we're going second. We want more tempo. We want more damage. What I'm looking for ideally out of that Scabs hit is to throw Claw, pitching the Mark the Beast, and then attack with the Wrecker Romp, guaranteeing that it would fill the graveyard with the Hungering Slaughter Beast. Because the game can actually go quite sideways if it doesn't discard the Hungering Slaughter Beast, and we like rack up that blood debt, not only with a Mark of the Beast already, but now our arsenal is like this very middling banisher. Like that's not great. So the Scabskins hit in my head was very important. We went for it. You roll a 1 there, you probably just scoop anyway. But like, look, honestly, I've gotten a lot more open to rolling Scabskins these days. I think Levia is actually more fun when you just don't stress too much about Scabs. Like, how ridiculous is that to say? But if you just accept that you have to roll Scabskins as part of your deck's game plan every once in a while, then, you know, outcomes that go in your favor or not just feel like you didn't really do anything wrong. It is what it is. When you're so trepidatious about Scabskins and then like you hit it and it goes poorly, you just like self-punish yourself mentally so much. Like, oh my god, I shouldn't have rolled Scabs, I shouldn't have done that. No, like sometimes you just should, and if it works out, like whatever. The deck is just fun. Like it's just fun. I think it's actually quite strong. I know it looks wonky as hell these days. You've got cards like Blue Trading, like what is this down here? Blue Trading, come on. But it's actually quite good. So anyway, speaking towards what the Grasp piece and Cloak piece do, the Mind Warp's now coming in for 5. So we just go ahead, get the Darkness pieces out of there. This now protected us from the Mind Warp because this turn actually plays really well. If we search out the Beast Within, we can look for the Bloodrush play, right? Because now we're replacing that blue with a 6. We had this other blue. That's going to be our pitch card. And now we can just play it out. We know our graveyard's in a good spot too. From all the graveyard fill turn 1, and now what the Bloodrush is doing for us, it's just a healthy spot to be. So the way that we've drawn up here, we're not doing anything crazy above rate. Like we're just returning like a 4-card 18 essentially. We're throwing the Mandible Claws, and then we're going to pitch the Dread Screamer into the Mark of the Beast. It's the exact same rate either way, right? So just go ahead, get the clunkier arsenal out of the way, set yourself up for now a go again piece in arsenal. Hugely important, especially in this matchup. It's so racy. They're also going to be on Tunic 3. Like the damage, basically the pace of this game is about to be set on this next turn. Their Tunic 3 turn, depending like what happens here, is going to change everything about how fast this game is. We assume that they deal tons of damage to us. It's actually kind of tricky with Scowling Fleshbag as well into specifically Gone in a Flash turns because they can fizzle the Scowling Fleshbag. So you want to make sure that you don't block with Scowling Fleshbag and another card, like don't block the whole thing, because they will try to fizzle Scowling Fleshbag by bouncing back the Gone in a Flash. So they are not going to deal damage with that attack anyway. So it can actually, like if it's very specifically the Gone in the Flash combo turn, like right here, it's like it can be rough. So Scowling, like there are definitely good windows for it. Like if their combo turn is a Blast to Oblivion, so much stronger than if it's Gone in a Flash. There's just so much draw sequence at play in this matchup. Like there really is. And especially now for us, like a lot of protections are gone. We don't have the Darkness pieces. The life is definitely about to swing. We assume not their biggest combo turn, but still, like they should be able to still pull something off pretty ridiculously strong. We're not going to present lethal on the next attack, but we're going to do quite a bit. We're going to basically put them in the decision, not this turn, but the next turn is block or die. So with the Graveling, the Dread, the other Dread in Arsenal, and a blue and a yellow, we're totally fine here to just start pushing Dread, Graveling. Like I said, not lethal, not even the best rate anymore, because we're basically throwing a 2-card 6 in the mix here, but it's about guaranteeing that next turn cycle presents lethal. So we're actually quite lucky with just their draw sequence, I guess. It did not do anything too ridiculous on that turn cycle for us. They also didn't stick the CLV, which I think that one might have just been a misplay. It could be like a decision they're making around what cards they want to keep in hand versus arsenal, but sticking a CLV was probably worth it. So, you know, they had the choice of like, yeah, they played the Sigil, for example, but you can, like before it resolves or something, just like pitch in the Gone in the Flash, other lightning card, whatever they had to keep it around. So now our return here is Dread, Graveling. Graveyard's going to be back at 3. We haven't found any recursion in this game, but we know Graveyard Fill is coming. with Scowling Fleshbag. We had the turn 0 kind of go our way, or turn 1 rather, go our way as well. We're just a little sketched out still because, hold up, we know they kept a Gone in a Flash. We are not demanding cards from them. They have functionally a, 6-card hand. I mean, we know one of them is like a Sigil of Brilliance, so like doesn't immediately gain value, but it's Gone in a Flash value, for example. So it looks sketchy. Then they block here, and this is, this gives us such a read on their turn. Oh my goodness, it's not like the ceiling blowout combo damage that probably kills us. Instead, we know their arsenal, or at least, I guess we don't know their arsenal is a Gone in a Flash. That Gone in the Flash could have been kept in hand instead. But I'm assuming still that they have like a Gone in a Flash, otherwise why would they block with one? So happy to see it. Happy to see it. I think this is where matchup knowledge actually would swing the game. I think the Oscilio can win from this position, but we just know a little bit more about how we want to play the matchup than they do, I think. So Yuto, don't snipe me because it might look a lot messier than this. But like we pointed out, the Blast to Oblivion combo turns definitely do get stumped by Scowling Fleshbag much more than a Gone in a Flash decision. So we block with the Scowling here. Great value, especially because they led by dropping the Sigil of Brilliance. We actually want to block the full 4 because they could have dropped like a Channel Lightning Valley. That could have been the other instant they dropped to bounce the Sigil. Just don't want to let that hit through. So full blocking the 4 here feels pretty strong. It's one of the reasons to not just chump block with a Scabskins early as well. You just want to like kind of hold on stuff like that. It's solid because it buys you HP to make decisions with later, but blocking 4 initially can be so impactful. It is and it isn't. Like we talked about not blocking all of it on a Gone in a Flash, for example, but you just don't know. The Oscilio also doesn't know what they're going to draw. Like the draw sequences on both of our halves in a game like this are going to be quite wild. So this turn, we got some extra graveyard fill out of it, but our hand is so dependent on Scabskins. Like I was really hoping that they mind warped us. That was my hope. That was my pray, that their final attack there would be a mind warp, because we really can't do much with this hand. The Scabskins line here basically lets us attack with Back Alley Break Line and then Boneyard Marauder. Like that's the best our hand would do, because of the way the graveyard is. Like yeah, pitching into claw instead of swing with the Back Alley is like the same damage, but actually for graveyard we would have wanted to attack with the Back Alley Break. So weird, but we don't hit on Scabs. So now I feel like the game is pretty tight again, because we knew that we would demand cards from them this turn, but now it's just so obviously less impactful. Like right now they give us 1 card. They can still fight back with a 4-card hand. We don't have AB after all. Our arsenal is not in a strong spot. So I don't feel confident at all anymore in this game. But the Oscilio as well, like, needs to kind of draw well. Like some of Oscilio's hands, especially in the late game, you remove some choices from them if they only have like 1 card that blocks anyway, right? Like when they have a bunch of instants and you make them block with a card, sure, like from our perspective, oh, they're just giving us 1 card, they got 4 left. But perhaps they are forced on that decision anyway because of non-blocks. So it's not the instance here, like they obviously have multiple blocking cards, but it is something that can kind of bail you in these endgame states when you do your math on, well, if I push, right, if we, like on that turn previous, we kept effectively a whole extra card, this yellow pitch to make sure that our turn went 3 wide. If you reduce the rate down, it makes the rate worse, but it means that the guaranteed damage we're presenting on this upcoming turn cycle is that much stronger. So with filtering our pitch a little bit, over pitching for that last play, we're a little bit rewarded. We dropped this Bloodrush hand. Technically we would have drawn it anyway, because we were only 3 cards off, not 4. But it's still something that helps. Like all those little incremental things you can do help when like you are draw sequence dependent. Just push a little bit on your overpitching and things like that. So from where we're at now, we shouldn't die to this follow-up attack, but we might die to a shock on the next turn. So this is a terrifying position because much like Reckless Swing, Oscilio can cheese kill a lot of these decks like on turn 0. They don't have to run Storm Striders at all to do this. They just need to run Null Shock. A lot of them are on 2 counts, It's not super likely, but they can, they can cycle towards it a little bit faster with their hero ability. So you just kind of like have to hope and pray that they don't have it, because we're just dead to it. We are just dead to it. The only choice we could have made differently is like block with the Graveling on that first blast attack. Then we're not dead to the shock, but then we don't know too much about our Bloodrush turn and whether it's actually going to be lethal or not. I actually think in this matchup, if I thought about it a little bit longer, we are totally safe to block down with that Graveling because it's Oscilio. Their whole hand won't block 12. Their hands like really won't do that. So even if we just go Claw into like our guaranteed attack in Arsenal, which is the Hungering, they should die. They should die. Like even one non-block in hand, they should die. So that's a little bit of a mistake in this matchup in particular to think about it that way, because, look, they actually have the null shock. What's funny about this though is their hand was incapable of killing us with it because they don't have 2 instant lightning cards to play. They need to buff it to 3 with Volzar. They could only buff it by 1, so their hand just does not function, which is, that's just lucky for us. But like I said, it was actually a bit of a mistake to put ourselves in that position. I think blocking with the Graveling just makes more sense. So look at that tight Oscilio game. But those games are winnable. I think the equipment suite is actually working. But like I kind of showed, there's differences to be made there. Maybe it's like if you're going second, you take Skullhorn instead of Fleshbag, then like, I don't know, something like that, right? It's close. It's close. All right, next game is versus a Arachne Marionette. I really am not super familiar with this matchup. The assassin I have most games into by far is still new. And then for some reason, I feel like Slippy is a lot more popular on Talishar than Mario. So I just don't have a ton of games yet. And overall heuristics into this hero tend to be like, oh, block the first dagger swing. But Levia doesn't get many freebie choices to do that because blocking an entire card, any kind of follow-up that they have, we don't get to pivot and say, okay, fine, like we'll just block with another G cards. Their turn was still less value, whatever. Our turn still has to be prioritized because we have to turn off and play into Blood Debt. So I actually find it quite tough to block the dagger swings. Like maybe there's a tighter way to play where you just like make it a rule. You always do it. However, with them going second, it's really tough to want to block the dagger swings because they've likely got this extra card anyway that they can just like swing twice and then do what they wanted to do. So I decide not to block, get a little punished, but because we have this agility token, we have Mark the Beast into Graveling. Like we don't actually need Graveyard for that, but holy crap, like their turn was Mark into Mark, or rather Clave into Mark, into Clave into Mark. So they actually ate a lot from us. Like they took armor, they still flip, they banished a card from our hand. Like that was actually a pretty gnarly turn going second. Holy crap. The only thing in our advantage here is our rate beats everything they did. Like yes, they took some things away from us, but we are returning now with a 3-card 13, which I guess with them hitting Trapdoor, like they're still ahead on this turn cycle if you look at it that way, to like just on rate numbers, but it's still, that's not a guarantee either. So if we kind of look towards what we're playing for, then I think we were fine. So now we're playing into Trapdoor. This is doing like nothing special on offense. So these turns more so just get to be like value trades. How do we want to play? Since we're not really worried about like many tricks, even like leaving the turn marked doesn't matter because they're just going to flip back on the next anyway. I guess it matters most for Mask of Deceit. Anyway, we make a bit of a greedy return here, and I don't know how I feel about this line. We had the guarantee of an Endless Maw, but we also were so close to just having like Horror Graveling happen. We were so close to just having Horror Graveling happen. I just felt it. I really felt like it was there. It was ripe for the taking. So I slammed the Horror. Yes, there are 4 cards in Graveyard. No, it was not a guarantee that we were going to hit the Graveling, but still, it was right there. I just, like, a little greedy, went for it. Not the right call. Shouldn't have done that. But you just don't know. Maybe I played the Endless Maw, and then like the Graveling gets banished anyway, and then like when does the horror look that good? Because we don't know when we're finding the next horror. Like, it gets a little tough sometimes. Regardless, we now follow up. They had a clunky turn that can happen with the assassins, right? So we take advantage, get our graveyard filled a little bit, throw that Endless Maw, and now set ourselves up with a Dread Screamer, which is going to look really solid for pushing in this like later half of the game. So these are the spots against Arachne Marionette that I think I need to just learn a little bit better. Like, where is using armor going to really hit a ceiling in this matchup? Was it going to be there? Like, is this actually where like a block from Husk changes everything? It's tough, like, because they could just pump to 7. So it like kind of reading what they're doing is a bit tough for me. Like, I haven't played Mario enough to know like what their hands feel like. So I've been trying just brute forcing my way through the matchup and just deciding like I'm really not going to worry too much about what you're doing, and then just like protect the one turn I know I care about with armor and just do what I do. Like, you don't have this effect with like new, right? Where new is banishing the cards you block with. Holy crap. Like, that changes how you have to make every decision, because you no longer get to ignore them because they have an inherently punishing mechanic towards when you just want to play your game. I just want to block a card here. You can't really do that. So that said, we block Fleshbag and they still go over. So my distrust of my deck, I guess, worked in our favor for once. Like, we didn't hit the Graveling, but then we got rewarded. We banished a blue off top. I was ready to sacrifice armor for that to not happen. They pushed themselves off of Arsenal so that the worst case could happen, but it just doesn't. That's like some funny, like, this matchup's actually kind of funny, right? There's a lot of like random back and forth that's going on. So this is another one of those positions where blocking the Hunter's Clave, I felt like in this position, because they have traded down cards, if I block the Hunter's Clave, then my turn is like more guaranteed to be a good rate in a turn that is like otherwise kind of struggling. Because if they have a Hunter's Clave and then just like attack, hit, attack again, like a Codex, whatever follow up, that's where I'm going to get punished the most. So if I can just give a card a Hunter's Clave and then their next attack is like doing nothing, that felt like maybe it was a better line. Perhaps with Black Tech up, it's just not always correct. That's what I'm saying. Like, I got to learn this matchup a little bit better. But regardless, we now draw up into a bit of an awkward Bloodrush hand, but they're only at 10. So if we just like don't have to give them cards, then even an awkward Bloodrush hand is probably good enough. Like, our arsenal is trash here. I'm really hoping that they get rid of it somehow. Like, they can turn into the Arachne that banishes it for us, for example, or they can like Codex Tunic CNC or something. Like, I'd appreciate all of that help right now, because we kind of got stuck with a weird one. But if we have advantage, I don't want to just be forced to roll Scabs. We can sink it into the Howl, so it's fine. It's not fantastic, but it's fine. So now we end up in a situation where Husk is forced. It blocks the full 6 anyway, so sure, why not? And they don't flip Trapdoor, which is nice, so we get to just full send. Full send a Bloodrush that draws pretty well. And the game's going long, so from their perspective, like, they have to know that they're playing around, not really playing around, but they're just going to be playing into this amount of Bloodrushes anyway. They're not as aggressive at banishing our deck, right, as like a new. They're more so banishing our immediate resources, our hand, our arsenal. We can play around that a lot better with this like holistic game plan because we have more guaranteed power in our deck. So just make those decisions correctly, right? And you should still get there. So this was a pretty interesting spot. The Call to the Grave has a lot of variability in what I could make it do for our turn. But the strongest thing that I see right now, rather than like take some gamble on the Beast Within, like we don't know if we really want to flip in for like a confirmed kill with the Demi Hero or not. So using it for Beast Within, even though it's probably going to make our hand look a lot better immediately, affects this longer game plan that we otherwise have, right? So just opt to like not do that, play out this really in between rate, and then just assume that, like, you know what, they're so low that on the next turn, surely if our hand kind of forces it, we can just like do something and flip, and we'll probably be fine. A little bit greedy for sure, to play into it that way. But, you know, we're experimenting still. Just experiment, limit testing, if you will, limit testing. So instead, play out a Dread Screamer just for 9. This is not going to do anything special in terms of rate. And in fact, our graveyard here is like really in a tough spot. Same as it was last turn, but now we like know for sure that we're cycling past some of these ways to fill the graveyard. Funny enough, if this Sigil of Cycles was a trade-in, this hand is like nuts. We have the agility anyway. We could just like trade in, discard the Beast Within, like we know we'd win. But not how it works out for us. So instead, it's just going to be the Beast Within for 9, gets our graveyard back to 3. Can't do anything with it this turn, but now we're setting a breakpoint in Arsenal and flipping into Consumed. So this changes everything. It's not a power card in Arsenal, but it's a breakpoint in Arsenal. And when we know that we have cards like Shadow Realm Horror, now we can throw like multiple breakpoints in a turn. Man, we do that and we probably just like win, right? So I feel fine. I feel like this next turn, surely it wins the game. Surely it wins the game. So the attack here should be pretty clear that it is just the Shadow Realm Horror. I don't know. Yeah, I hope I don't click the Dread Screamer. Okay, it should have been the Shadow Realm Horror. I guess just misclick, or I thought the Dread Screamer in graveyard was blue or something from the previous turn, but it should have been the Shadow Realm Horror regardless. That was the intent, but instead we can do something kind of cute here. So the Call to the Grave in this kind of situation lets us instead pull out the Back Alley Break Line, which guarantees that this hand of otherwise like all blues now gets over because we have this extra guaranteed red in our arsenal. So check this out. We now get to come in for the Hungering. We can come in for that Claw, and we would even be able to reset Arsenal with that Dread Screamer if we wanted. But regardless, the game should have been over with that Horror instead of the Dread Screamer. Whatever. Game still played out relatively well. I just really gotta hand it to Levia. There's like so much less stress in the game right now. You just like know for a fact Viscera is gone. Oh, what a beautiful feeling. The deck is actually feeling innovative again and interesting, and in a way that's not just like throwing everything at the wall, but more so, you know what? Like, let's explore. You know, we're not the best deck in the room. We're like pretty much never going to be the best deck in the room, but we're not under this like insane pressure to compete with Viscera. And so just don't. Just like it's so straight. It's so alleviating. You just don't have to worry about that anymore. A lot of matchups are still hard, of course. I don't think this deck solves everything, but I think it plays really well into a strategy that I really haven't explored since Art of War was gone. When Art of War went the way of Viscera, I had not really explored full banish Levia again, just because it felt like it wasn't going to be sustainable. But not the case. Not the case with enough games now to kind of test prove the theory of Sigil Cycles trade-in and Call to the Grave. So hopefully you all enjoy this last week of Road to Nationals. Hopefully Levia actually gets a win. You know, we don't want a speedrunner to LL pretty much ever. I'd hate it if that happens. But getting your name on that leaderboard, the challenge of winning with Levia, and the joy that's attached to it, of course, the upgrade to your role that you get in the League of Levia, all that is still worth someone's time this last weekend of Road to Nationals. So hopefully you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.